Early in 2024, the Society of Model Shipwrights in the UK asked me to make a presentation on the research I undertook to build a model of the steamship Naparima. Although some people become ship modelers simply because they want to experiment with their hands, there are others like me that are interested not just in building the ships, but in recording some of the history that relates to us. In my case, I was very interested in only building ship models that relate to the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And so I'm going to take you through the most comprehensive piece of research that I had to do in the 20 odd years that I've been ship modeling, and I hope you find it interesting. When you choose a topic like the local shipping industry, you're building boats that are not famous, you realize how much of a challenge there is to find data on it. And in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, very few of the ships had an extensive amount of details about them. I first became aware of the Naparima when I was looking at Facebook and came across a post by Bruce Locke and that there was a ship called the Naparima. And this post, even though I only saw it in 2016, was posted way back in 2012. His grandfather, Herbert Locke, worked for the railroad company in Trinidad and assisted in the salvage of the Naparima following the accident in 1926. And he was given an Elkington coffee pot as a gift for the work that he had done. So I started my research on the internet, and I was surprised at the number of responses I got when I made my first search. This took me to the Lloyd's Register, which identified a number of papers concerning the vessel. Lloyd's, as you know, keeps an extensive record of every ship that is registered. They also do service work on behalf of many clients and keep these records online. I wrote to Lloyd's asking if they had any additional information or reports, and they kindly offered to send me a copy of articles published in the Engineering magazine concerning this particular vessel. The first article referencing the Naparima was written in March 1905, while the second, written the following month, was a six-page description of the vessel, including detailed drawings of the inner workings. To say I was blown away would be an understatement. The first image literally knocked my socks off. It contained detailed ship plans indicating to me that somewhere there must be copies of her original plans. It also contained a drawing of the ship as she was prepared to sail across the Atlantic. My first stop was to look at local sources of information, and I went to the University of West Indies, where their university library had an extensive source of very good information. They presented me with 3 photographs claiming to be the Naparima, but the bottom right turned out to be a postcard of the St. Patrick, a sister ship to the Naparima. There are 4 known photographs of this vessel. The first one that you see here is the Naparima as she had her sea trials in the Thames River. The second, third, and fourth pictures were taken on the north coast, what we call Down the Islands, which is a series of islands on the northwestern tip of Trinidad. And the railroad service through its ships serviced these islands on a regular basis every other day. Then it was down to the National Archives, and I was fortunate enough to know Roma Wangsang, who is the Senior Archives and Research Officer, and she allowed me full access to all the newspaper articles that went way back around when this great ship came to Trinidad and Tobago. And it really filled so many of the gaps. The Naparima was skippered by Captain Flanders and 14 crew, leaving England on the 19th of May 1905 and heading for the Canary Islands. There she picked up additional supplies and, of course, lots of coal. Then she crossed the Atlantic to Barbados, leaving Barbados the following day and arriving in Trinidad at 2 a.m. on the 16th of June, some 28 days later. Over the 20 years that she served the public of Trinidad, there were many articles in the newspaper about special trips made to different ports, including some trips around the island and as far away as Tobago. In 1926, there were a number of articles about her sinking following extensive coverage of the Commission of Inquiry. I've prepared a separate paper on the findings of the inquiry, which did shed much more light on the history of this lovely ship. I even found an article from the Jamaican newspaper, The Gleaner, which detailed the accident. Life is full of circles. In this accident, 12 people drowned, and one of the survivors who swam to shore turned out to be a relative of mine and was one of the key witnesses in the commission of inquiry that followed. As word got out that I was researching the history of this ship, all sorts of information started to show up. At left is a shipping schedule from 1908 showing that the boat only serviced the southern tip of the island. The second one from 1921 again repeats this service. However, we know from the photographs that she in fact serviced the north of the island. One of the interesting facts that came out was the turnaround time for each of the stops was only half an hour. This map shows the route that the service provided, and it was so popular that the state ordered a second vessel, the St. Patrick, in 1913 to add additional capacity. The railroad only accessed the west coast of Trinidad at two major cities, in the north at Port of Spain and in the south at San Fernando. So the addition of these vessels greatly increased her ability to offer transport to the entire west coast for both the people and for cargo. With all this wonderful data flowing in, I decided to write to the National Maritime Museum in London to see if they had any further information, and I discovered that they actually had 7 sheets of original ship plans. These plans had never been copied, so I had to pay £370 to have them digitalized. And what arrived literally blew my socks off. This is the main sheet, which showed her side elevation and the layout of the main and upper decks. This was followed by various detailed sections which show the connection at various parts of the rib layout and tie back to the main plan. This is the galvanized sheet layout or plating profile of the ship, the lower and upper cabin layouts, the lifeboat or gibs, and finally the crew quarters located in the bow of the vessel. The research continued when I found that there was a box ALB 1215 in the National Maritime Museum that contained some photographs, and I was really happy to find the original photograph of the Naparima on her sea trials in the Thames. There was another boat also built by Tony Croft, the name we're not sure, and perhaps one of the more interesting photographs was a picture of coal being offloaded from a main ship, and this is how coal got to all the Caribbean islands and was used in steam boilers. One would think that with all this information I would be a happy modeler, but I wasn't. There was still a lot of information missing about details that are not reflected in the plans and in the information that I had found so far. For instance, one of the most obvious ones is what did the propeller look like? It's a very visible detail, and I've done extensive research to try and find a Thornycroft propeller around the 1900s, but really haven't been able to come up with anything that's conclusive. The only image that I came up with was this ship, the Y Marie, which was built around the same time as the Naparima, and you'll see that that propeller is significantly different than the one that I actually installed on the ship. And if we come back and look at this vessel again, you'll see these are the internal restoration of that particular steamboat in New Zealand. And the internal framing reflects the plans that are shown in Naparima. So again, this is a very useful piece of information. and certainly will help me if I ever build a second attempt at this ship. And my research led me to this wonderful gentleman, Glenn Beeden. He's a train enthusiast and a historian and has done extensive research on the railroads of Trinidad. In fact, he is the co-author of a book on the railroads of Trinidad. He knew all the details and had so much information to give me. In fact, he was quite a bit upset that he hadn't seen the photographs and certainly hadn't seen the model. But he plans, should he ever do a second edition of the book, to include my research and, of course, the photographs. And I did produce a wonderful video on our first meeting, which can be found on YouTube. Glenn also supplied me with a picture of the jetty down at Cedros, which is at the very end of the Naparima's journey. And you'll see the height of the jetty in relation to the beach. And that explains why this vessel could only have a draft of 3 feet, because the accretion was so high in these areas. But now it's time to give you a little feedback on what we found, some details on the steamship. She was ordered by the Crown Agent. She was designed and built by John Thornycroft of Chiswick in 1904 and launched on the 7th of March 1905. She was operated by the Trinidad Railroad Company and carried 40 first-class passengers and 100 second-class passengers. She was 140 feet long, 21 feet wide, and had a depth in a hold of 6 feet. She weighed 42 tons and carried a draft of only 3 feet, and is estimated that she could carry up to 40 tons of cargo. Her 2 engines produced a top speed of 13 knots. She was built of galvanized steel sheeting, which were riveted onto mild steel frames. She had a wooden deck. The type of wood was not defined. She had 7 watertight compartments, carried 2 lifeboats, and had 4 cranes, each capable of lifting 1 ton. She was powered by 2 triple expansion steam engines that were designed and built by Thornycroft. Each engine was capable of producing 235 horsepower when run at 500 RPM. She used seawater in her boilers. Each engine had its own surface condenser, and these powered twin propellers that were 3 foot 9 inches in diameter. Because of the shallow water in which the vessel was to operate, the propellers were housed in twin tunnels in her hull, which, together with the rudder, were above the bottom of the hull. As a result, if you look at the propellers, you will see that one of the blades of the propeller actually protrudes above the waterline. Once the boat started to move forward, this tunnel would fill with water, completely submerging the propeller and becoming very efficient. While searching the internet, I came across this working model of an engine made by George Brentle in the UK. It is the identical engine that was designed by Thornycroft and used in the Naparima. Details of this engine can be found on YouTube, and you can see the fine workmanship that George put into it. It's really, really stunning and probably puts an end to me ever thinking of trying to make a model of the engine. I came across this book written by Richard Sennett, The Marine Steam Engine, and it was written in 1885 and really gives you details and lets you know everything you could possibly want to know about a steam engine in the late 1800s, which would translate right into the early 1900s. Really a fantastic reference book. And this is another image of a Thornycroft boiler of the time and of her construction, and shows some resemblance to that shown in the plan. The image at the right was taken from the ship's plan and shows this side profile. And using that information, plus the information in the plan, this was my attempt at what I thought the boiler and firebox would look like. Other details that we looked at were the type of steam whistle that the boat might have had, and I never found anything that resembled what is shown in the plan. And so this is my view, really a reflection of the plan more than anything I found on the net. There were some long benches shown in the drawing on the upper deck, and I couldn't find anything close to this, so I just copied the bench as best I could, and the end result is what you see here. In the case of the benches with back supports, there were many images on the net of typical benches of this nature that were used on steamboats at the time. This is the one I chose to build. Fortunately for me, I have a daughter who is CAD literate, and so I got a friend to 3D print them for me, and this is what they looked like when it was all finished and painted. And we were looking at further details taken off the National Maritime Museum plans. These are from the Y. Marie, same time period approximately, and show the throttle assembly, a twin throttle, and steering wheel along with the column, exactly what is shown in the plans. Research data started to come in from all sorts of different areas. This is more printed material on the Naparima that I found, borrowed, or photographed. The most significant one is the top right-hand corner, which is a ticket for the rent of a cabin for 78 cents, which is a trip of about 5 miles. When you get old plans, and these are over 100 years old, they tend to shrink and distort, and you'll find lines don't necessarily line up correctly. And of course, this was a digital copy, and although it was in quarter-inch scale, no matter how hard the local service, digital printing service, tried, they couldn't get a print that would be exactly a quarter-inch scale. So I called on a friend of mine, John Otway, who's an artist and architect, and convinced him to do a full set of plans for me. And they were nothing short of spectacular. And so I'll let you decide on the quality of John's work. So again, you can look at the detail. Some of these were taken from bits and pieces that we got off the internet. Some of them are directly from the plan. A few of them are interpretations of what we think the particular detail might look like. But John's work was just tremendous, and again, all done to quarter-inch scale. I think in total I had 13 sheets of plans when John was finished. So you would think at this stage that I have more than enough information to start building the model. But the truth is, as I went along, I found lots of problems trying to understand various aspects of the ship. And so I decided the time had come for me to try and find the wreck and see if I could get some friends to dive on her. Fortunately for me, I have a friend, Robert Stobel, who has a dive company and a number of small submersibles. And he has a sidebar scanner. And so out we went to the area that the Commission of Inquiry led us to think that where the wreck might be. And after a few hours, we got a fantastic hit right where the wreck should be. She's in 73 feet of water, so it's very diveable. We had an unsuccessful day. Current was running at 3 knots, visibility was terrible. So we do plan to come back and make another attempt. Looking back on the amount of research that I was able to get, I'm in awe. Remember, I didn't even know this ship existed. So to get all these details about this wonderful boat is really surprising. But it just shows you what you can do and the surprises that are waiting there if we do some good research. I continue to share back the information I've received with both Lloyd's and with the National Maritime Museum in the hope that it might provide some benefit to somebody in the future. And I look forward to completing this build and perhaps building a second plank on frame model that is worthy of being a first-class museum quality ship. The model has pride of place in our home. It's been a very special build for me because of the challenge it has been in gathering all the information. So I hope you found the journey interesting. And if you're going to do the research on a ship that is close to you, I hope you're able to find success as I have. So we'll see you in the next build when I show you how I actually went about building this model.